When I was a medical student, an elderly woman came for consultation about a mass on the side of her jaw. Our hospital was one of the leading hospitals for cancer treatment in the world, and the mass was skillfully identified fast, and state-of-the-art therapy was determined, which involved both chemotherapy and the total removal of her lower jaw. One of the staff doctors went to discuss our findings and recommendations with the woman and her family and scheduled the surgery. He returned outraged. The old woman had refused surgery, and her family had supported her in this decision. He had explained carefully the almost certain fatal outcome of her sort of cancer without surgery, described the surgery in detail, and given her the statistics of post-operative survival. The old woman had thanked him for his concern and said that she would now go home. All his arguments had failed to move her. Finally, he asked her to sign a paper absolving the hospital and the staff of all responsibility. Calmly, with her family looking on, she had signed. Others had gone to talk with them and with her. Despite enormous pressure from the staff, she left the hospital. She never returned. Her refusal to accept our help left the staff angry for days. Our attitude effectively disenfranchised her with respect to her own life. Yet any of us would have passionately defended her right to vote. Despite her enormous dignity and the obvious love of her family, I remember thinking that they were very strange people. I never found out what lay behind her choice, what had caused her to make her difficult decision with such calm certainty. But 35 years have brought some change, not only to me, but to medicine itself. Recently, after I presented this story to a class of medical students, a second-year student commented that he felt the problem was that the doctors had known this woman's disease, but not the woman herself. Who was she? He asked. She was elderly. Had anyone found out what she had lived by all that time? What was important to her? A fine discussion ensued about the difference between defending a person against death and making a commitment to their life. The students raised some hard questions. How do we serve life? Can we know what is best for people, or do we only know what is best for the treatment of their disease? Is it possible to improve someone's physical health and yet diminish their integrity? The class split right down the middle. Some felt much the way that my own classmates had felt, frustrated, judgmental, and angry. But others thought that the doctors of long ago had diagnosed, but they hadn't understood. They had been rendered impotent, not by the woman's refusal of surgery, but by their own refusal to listen and know who she was. This group of students conceived the task of her doctors not as prolonging her life at all costs, but as enabling her to live her life according to her own values. Depending on who she was, this might include prolonging her life, or it might not. I wonder how these comments might have been received 35 years ago by my classmates and teachers. I suspect not well. Unquestionably, we had missed an opportunity to learn about something far more important than the diagnosis and treatment of cancer. but the capacity to recognise that opportunity lay far in the future.
I thought, when I started working on this address, that I was going to discuss two issues: some aspects of bullying and why I come to church so infrequently now. But I found as I wrote that I was actually addressing the huge issues of life and God. This is a pretty enormous claim, but given time, I may be able to lead you to where I am in my thinking now. As usual, I start with a story. It occurred at a recent 21st birthday party for a friend from Kangaroo Island. Of course, this meant catching up with many of our other old island friends. Maria, a dear friend who went through a very rough patch just shortly after we left the island, was looking fabulous. Bright, bubbly, and full of life. As we chatted, she told me about the changes in her life. After a life-threatening illness, she had had trouble returning to work. Discouraged, she'd shifted sideways and accepted a job in a related field, doing it well, but not enjoying it as much as she had her original vocation. With a change in the hierarchy at the original workplace, she had been able to return and was enjoying the work more than she'd ever done before. I inquired about the hierarchy change, and another of my very good island friends was named. A story of consistent bullying came out. I was shocked. The friend I knew and the boss she knew seemed to be two different people, and yet I was quite able to believe what I was hearing. Her boss, my friend, is an achiever who expects a high standard of performance from herself and from those around her. Widowed, cruelly young, she struggled fiercely with her grief and responsibilities as the sole breadwinner for her two tiny children. Intensely private about that struggle, she is not particularly sympathetic to the effects of life's traumas on other people's ability to perform at their best. Maria could only see my friend as a bully, and certainly the change in the workplace after she left indicates that she was. But was it bullying, or was it a sort of complacency? And is that question really important? The effect on the people she was in charge of was grim, whatever the cause. I had a similar experience working with a woman whom everyone else considered charming and gracious. For those of us working with her, she was a clever, subtle bully, consistently making us feel belittled and inadequate. But was she deliberately bullying us? Or was she simply oblivious to our feelings? Was she perhaps too complacent about her position so that she was completely unaware of the pain she was causing? Out of this jumble of thoughts, I tried to explain to June what I needed to say. We decided to leave the service untitled. My thoughts were far too complicated to pin down with a formal name. To tell you the truth, I'm still not sure that I have pinned them down, but I've certainly found it a challenge trying to make them coherent. I grew up in the very privileged suburb of Glen Osmond. I went to a privileged private girls' school, and my friends were all of my own social class. I happily developed the same complacent attitudes as my friends had. All this, despite my parents who grew up in lower middle class Nottingham, went to the local school and developed very open-minded attitudes along the way. My friends and I were, as far as I can recall, almost totally unaware of, and certainly unconcerned about, the lives of the less privileged children around us. We despised the boys from the nearby technical high school and were extremely prejudiced about the girls from the Catholic college down the road. I can also distinctly remember making disparaging comments to my friends about the children living in Vine Lane and Queen Street, poverty-stricken lanes in the triangle at the top of Glen Osmond and Portrush Roads,